The views expressed on the Nova Society are those of the panelists and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views or opinions of the Phoenix Research Institute or any institution which any panel member is associated. Welcome back to the Nova Society, a space where dialogue deepens understanding and civic responsibility comes to life. I'm Dr. Mark Bound, joined by our regular panel, Dr. Scott Gershwer and Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon. Together, we'll unpack the stories that matter most, exploring the headlines, the history, and the big ideas shaping today's conversations. Let's dive in and hear what the panel has for us today.
Today we have a question from Tam, who writes to us from Buffalo, New York. Yay,
Buffalo!
Buffalo! Go
Shuffle
Phillies!
off to Buffalo.
It appears that the Trump administration and Saudi Arabia have reached an agreement that would allow the Saudis to begin enriching uranium. The announcement frames the program as strictly civil and commercial, but the reality is that shifting from civilian enrichment to weapons-grade capability is well within Saudi technical reach. That raises a fundamental question. Why would the United States support the emergence of another potential nuclear actor in an already unstable region? This decision has clear implications. It risks emboldening Iran to accelerate its own nuclear ambitions, and it introduces new strategic pressure points in a part of the world already defined by volatility. Israel has signaled discomfort with the agreement, even as the administration insists that the deal is contingent on Saudi Arabia's joining the Abraham Accords, a late addition that may itself become a sticking point for Riyadh. So, for this panel, I want to focus on accountability and strategic intent. What is the rationale for enabling Saudi enrichment at this moment? Why announce this now? And what does the administration believe it gains by introducing another nuclear-capable state into the regional equation? And more broadly, does this reflect a miscalculation, or is it part of a larger strategic plan to reshape or potentially destabilize the Middle East? If so, what does the panel see as the ultimate objective behind this move? Thank you, Tam. Excellent questions.
There's a lot there.
Mark and Scott? Yes, indeed.
There's a lot. There really is a lot there. The only question I have is in the first part of her question, which says that enriching to weapons-grade capabilities within the Saudi technical reach. I don't know if that's true, but I'm sure that they can pay to get people in to be able to do it. So I guess from that standpoint, yeah, they probably do have that capability. Why would you want another nuclear actor in this region? Beats the living heck out of me. Unless you're going to make them all nuclear actors and then just say, hey, sort it out, guys, and hope the stability and stability paradox actually plays out the way it's designed. I don't see that as being possible. Stability and stability paradox basically says that all actors are reasonable. And this is a region with a lot of religious decisions based upon religious and ideological, historical idealism. That makes them, in many ways, not reasonable actors. So why you would want to do this beats the heck out of me. I do think that you're right. I think that last little bit put in by Trump after this was discussed about the Abraham Accords, that might be the sticking point. That might be the thing that kills this. But, Saudi Arabia, right now, yeah, they're an ally, but they're not our friends. They are definitely not our friends in any shape or form. They pay for the relationship that they have with us. And they've got the perfect president to be able to utilize their ability to pay billions of dollars to be able to foster that relationship. I can understand why they would want nuclear power. I get it, I guess, but why we would think that this was a good idea is beyond me. Scott?
All right, well, there's a couple of things. Where do you begin?
I know.
Well, let's begin with the All in the Family. There was an All in the Family episode where Archie Bunker went on TV as one of those what was the thing called at the end? People were
Man
allowed
on
to
the
speak.
street.
The man, like a man on the street thing. Yeah, where he went into the, but he went into the studio and he was talking about a news story and they wanted to hear from what regular people thought. And the issue at the time was hijacked airplanes. And he said, I have the perfect solution for people against people who hijack airplanes. As you get on the plane, everybody is handed a handgun. And so when you get on the plane, everybody has a gun. And that will keep us safe because nobody would be willing to hijack a plane if everybody had a gun. And it was a big joke at the time. It's probably not anymore. It's not as funny as as it was back in those days because it was a weird idea to hand somebody the very weapon that they would need to hijack a plane, and almost assured that that gun would be used during the flight, one way or another. And even people who didn't necessarily want to hijack the plane, finding themselves with a gun in their hand, might actually go off. Let's start with that, because I think the idea here is to balance Iran, who may already have a nuclear weapon. Israel has never admitted that they have nuclear weapons. It's widely considered that they do, but no, they've never admitted it out loud. But balancing Iran by giving Saudi Arabia that power would be something that somebody thinking along the same lines as Archie Bunker, and by that I mean Donald Trump, would think is a good, smart deal. What do you think of that?
Yeah, that makes sense. It makes sense. Plus, there might be an economic reason here. The Saudis rely on an awful lot of oil to produce the electricity. That is oil that they cannot export.
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, what other commodity do they have that they can, that makes the kingdom the money that it makes? If we look at it from that economic standpoint, if the Saudis had truly controlled civil nuclear power production for the use of civilian use and civilian controlled, that gives them more oil to export. And at the same time, when we look at that, could reduce the amount of influence that Russia and China has in this game, because now the Saudis are less reliant and can be a little bit more choosy and can be more probably influenced on where their oil goes. So, I mean, there could be an economic standpoint to this. That would be, for me, one of the only logical reasons, just taking in the infrastructure of Saudi Arabia and its use of its own oil, and it's basically costs them, it's almost doubling the price to them, because that's money they aren't making, but they have to use. So that could be it.
Okay, and then the next thing that I'll bring up is something that very few Americans seem to know about, which is called Operation Drop Shot. In 1949, America was the only country with a nuclear bomb. We dropped two of them in 1945, but we had others. I think they were supposed to be about 300 maybe nuclear weapons that the United States had. And Operation Drop Shot was a plan to use those weapons sometime in the 1950s and to drop, I think it was, 100 or 200, 100 cities, drop bombs on 100 cities throughout the USSR, Poland, Hungary, the Middle East, different places in the Middle East. And it was a serious plan that was classified. It was only declassified in the late 1970s. And the idea was that we were the only nuclear power at the time and that we could do whatever we wanted to do with our nuclear weapons. Well, one of the members of the Manhattan Project had given plans to a Soviet spy, and the Soviet Union became the second country to have nuclear bomb, and that ended Operation Drop Shot. And from then on until now, what has kept us safe from nuclear war has been the idea of mutually assured destruction. We have bombs, they have bombs. If we all use the bombs, everybody's going to die. Now, That depends on having rational actors. And as Mark has pointed out, the people who run Saudi Arabia seem to be rational businessmen first, but there is also a strain of Wahhabism in Saudi Arabian religion that is a very non-rational sect within Islam, right? I think Islam is as rational as any other religion, but the Wahhabists are particularly volatile, and leads to a lot of people getting their heads chopped off and things like that, right? Sharia law and all that. Iran also has an aspect of a sort of what is the word for it? Where you're looking at the end times more than anything else. Aspect to their religion, which makes them a particularly volatile religious sect. Also, a strain of Shia Islam in Iran. They don't seem to be the people who are in charge right now, right? Because I think the IRGC is pretty much in charge of Iran's military, but the religious part of their government, the oversight that they say is the son of the late Ayatollah who was killed on the first day of the war. He is supposedly one of these Shiites who is willing to, like his father, and I believe he actually himself fought in the war against Iraq in the 1980s. And in that war, people armed with nothing more than simple plastic toy keys charged across open fields into machine gun fire and sure death, because the Ayatollah told them to, and as long as they were clutching this key, they would go to heaven. And that actually, believe it or not, people, happened. Human waves designed to use up the enemy's munitions and ammunition, sacrificing themselves in the name of their religion for their religious leader. And we have spent, I don't know how many presidential terms trying to prevent them from getting nuclear bombs, and now we're afraid that we've blown that one. They're going to get it if they want it, and our first response is to give it to their number one rival, Sunni Islam, Saudi Arabia, as a balancing act to them. This is the same idea as Archie Bunker had. If everybody's got a gun, then nobody has a gun. It's that level of thinking. And rather than getting rid of all the guns, it makes matters a lot worse, because the possibility of somebody getting a bomb who doesn't care about life on Earth is greatly magnified. And we are in a really, really bad place right now as far as the world is concerned. Countries who have never considered becoming nuclear states are now considering it because of this proliferation and all the work that has been done since the 1950s and 60s for non-proliferation has been thrown out the window.
And if the desire by the United States government is to reshape the Middle East, we have to remember it's a very unstable region of the world. It doesn't happen overnight. And if you're going to do, as Scott pointed out, the Archie Bunker philosophy of everybody gets a gun, you've got to then survive through that period. And it's going to be a very volatile period where everybody has this capability. And then you're going to see, and I truly believe that you'll see another arms race. But you're going to see it at a little bit different level than, say, with the United States and the Soviet Union. You're going to see these states such as Iran, Saudi Arabia, Israel, any one of these actors is going to get involved, because nobody wants to be at a gunfight with a knife. And they're going to look at this and say, hey, we've got to get on board. And there are, even if they don't have the capability and technology to be able to develop these weapons themselves, there are actors out there such as North Korea that would be more than willing to sell it to them and give them, what they need to be able to be on par. And like I say, the concept of the instability stability paradox is that reasonable actors, and they understand mutual self-destruction, and they will fight small proxy wars in place of a large nuclear engagement. This is a very tight area as far as where the land mass that we're talking about here. This is really tight. This isn't like, as I say, the United States and Soviet Union, where we were separated by oceans. This is everybody's a border country. And I think it just basically, if the desire, and I think it's kind of a cynical to think it is, that we're really trying to destabilize it for the purpose of creating a new world order in the Middle East. I just can't see the Middle East in the way it sits right now. Because guess what? Egypt's going to want it. Egypt's going to jump on board quick, and it's just going to make all the more difficult maintaining the peace. Right now, even though it's volatile, it's more small proxy kind of things going on there. This would take that off the table. And even though the proxy wars cost lives, and it's a tragedy that we have them, the bottom line is it's nothing compared to what nuclear capable Middle East countries could do to each other.
Look, the word I was looking for before was eschatology, right?
Yes.
Which means obsessed with the end times.
Yep.
And we have, and I don't mean to sound like we're, bragging about this, but we have premillennialists here in the United States, including the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson, who is a premillennialist eschatological adherent to a religion that believes that we can usher in the end times and, have the final battle of the apocalypse, et cetera, et cetera. So this is not anything that we should think of as being exotic or Middle Eastern. No. These people exist, and there is a strain of it in Judaism. There's a strain of it in Christianity. There's certainly a strain of it in Islam and Zoroastrianism, which is I believe an Iranian or Iraqi religion. I don't know if they still practice it, but that's where the roots are. Where we're ushering in the end times is a good thing, because it's the next step in our evolution towards being more whatever it is that we're supposed to be. Perfect. And so we're giving regimes in the Middle East weapons of mass destruction when there are people in those power structures who believe in this idea of, the apocalypse or the final battle, and would love to get it started. And again, there are people here in the United States, and we need to always be on guard against making sure that these people don't get too much power. Because I do believe that there is a faction of Republican, Christian, crazy right people who would love to usher in the end times by starting a nuclear war between let's say, Israel and Iran, and have it out once and for all, and let's get it all over with. And it is the last thing on earth you want, people. So, we've gone from Operation Drop Shot, where we were the only ones to have it, to a great period, I guess, of mutually assured destruction, which certainly has scarred me as a human being, unable to believe in the future my whole life. And we have a period where we have been trying to get rid of as many nuclear weapons as possible, a period of negotiation with Saudi Arabia, with the Soviet Union during the Reagan years, et cetera, et cetera. And now we're at a period of proliferation where, because George W. Bush took his eyes off them, North Korea was able to nuke up, and now has many more weapons than some other countries have, and is an unstable regime. We've seen Pakistan and India engaging in battles, mainly over Kashmir or other sort of territories that they both claim, and have come very close at times to having a nuclear standoff. We do not want this to happen. And somehow or another, somebody with sense in their head needs to get to Trump and say it's a really bad idea to let Saudi Arabia have any kind of nuclear power, especially when they are not subject to the parts of the non-proliferation agreements that say that they will subject themselves to inspections. They have already declared that they will not be subject to inspections, where Trump has this sort of fantasy that it'll be a black box. They'll never even know what they have because it'll be run by U.S. companies. Bullshit. That is a fucking fever dream at best. They will, if they have it on their territory, they will control it. Saudi Arabia and Israel were going to make peace, which required a Palestinian statehood before 10/7. It should not, this nuclear deal should not be a part of that at all. You know, if the Saudis want to sign on to the Abraham Accords and they have as part of their deal that Israel has to grant a state to the Palestinians, great, do it. A two-state solution is what most of us have been talking about all along anyway. Just make sure that you have plenty of troops there to keep the people there in line and have the power to do that, to make sure that a 10/7 or a Yom Kippur war or 1967 never happen again. That's on you now to make sure that that never happens again. And remember that Israel is a nuclear armed state, even though they don't admit it. This is destabilizing and crazy to begin the proliferation of nuclear arms in the world. It is insanity like nobody has ever seen before.
I wanted to ask a question. The reason that we, the United States, have bases in places like Saudi Arabia and so on, Kuwait, is to help protect those areas. And the Iran war has shown that we cannot do that. And one reason that Saudi Arabia and Kuwait and other places are being hit by Iran is because we have bases there. And I wondered what your thoughts were on whether, because Trump is transactional, on whether the agreement to have a nuclear Saudi Arabia is sort of a quid pro quo agreement, payment maybe to Trump, or some sort of transaction, because we can clearly no longer protect Saudi Arabia. And this is going to, if we agree to this, then, Saudi Arabia will do that, or they will not take another action against us, for instance, if we agree to allow them nuclear.
Yeah. I thought where you were going with is this to raise the stakes, to like threaten Iran with, okay, we're gonna give nukes to Saudi Arabia if you don't start making peace with us. And
that could be also, but.
And that linkage would certainly be an escalation of the war. It really just depends on what Iran thinks of it. To me, what it would do is it would hasten their desire to have nukes themselves and have the exact opposite effect that you would hope that it would have, right? I don't think that you hand somebody, you say to, we're in a conflict, it's a limited conflict, but it is a conflict, and we're going to give your worst enemy, your sworn religious, like non-rational, emotional enemy, a huge weapon to use against you if you don't come and make peace with us. They may just say, you do your worst and we'll do our worst and we'll see how it all plays out. I mean, it would be a really bad gamble, in my opinion, if Trump were to try to hold over Iran this idea. But I think you are correct. I think the idea was that U.S. military strategy was to surround Iran with military bases and allies. I mean, there's no, like, you can't look at a map without noticing that Afghanistan's on one side of Iran and Iraq is on the other. And what two countries did we go to war with George W. Bush? Those two countries. One for, I mean, you can hold the Taliban responsible, you can hold Al-Qaeda responsible. Invading Afghanistan was never a good idea for anybody, and certainly wasn't a good idea for us. We held on to it for 20 years before Trump decided to turn around and give the place back to the Taliban. Iraq seems to be, at this point, balancing between being a U.S. colony and an Iranian proxy, right? There are elements of both within that country, and who ends up winning that one, I suppose, will be strategic. But this idea of surrounding them with bases didn't stop them from targeting our bases and the countries that they were in. I believe they hit inside Egypt. So if that was the strategy, it didn't work. It didn't serve the purpose that it was supposed to serve. And you have to give them some credit. I don't want to sound too much like Dr. Berna here, but you have to give them some credit. They learned quickly from the defeat that they suffered last year when Israel and the United States took out their air defenses and their ability to monitor incoming weaponry, and they have done the same to us. They targeted radar, they targeted early warnings that, right now we don't know when Iran is shooting missiles at us because they've destroyed the radar facilities that would see them incoming. And so they've learned from us, and they're sort of winning that OODA loop, as I've said before, where you reorient yourself based on what your enemy does and get there quicker than they can. That is what Iran has proven themselves to be very nimble, and we are very slow to react. And I think this is one more stage of that. Given Saudi Arabia, nuclear enrichment is a disaster. Terrible idea, and the most dangerous weapon in the world in the hands of the same people, 15 of whom attacked us on 9/11, is a really, really bad idea.
I agree with that. You've got to go with history here, people. Who you really want to give this to. And again, there may be, I think my biggest issue to Tam is this. I understand the questions you're asking, and it would really, if this was a logical administration, we may be able to give you some sort of an answer that would make some sense. Problem is we don't know what the real motivations are here. If there are any motivations other than money, this may be simply another transactional thing for Trump and his kids, and that's all this might be. We just don't know. And he doesn't seem to give a rat's ass about anything as long as he's making money off of it. So it'll be interesting to see exactly how all this plays out. But like I said, to ask us to come up with a logical progression of why this is happening now, you'd have to have way more information than anybody here in this room, or probably anywhere outside of the Trump orbit has. There could be all sorts of motivations for this, and we just absolutely do not know. And that's all the time we have for today's episode. The Nova Society is a production of Nova Society Media, a division of the Phoenix Research Institute. We want to thank our production partners, Buzzsprout, who hosts the Nova Society, Audacity, our editing team, Apple Podcasts, the largest source of podcast and music online, Spotify, the most popular platform for the Nova Society, and iHeartRadio, your destination for all things music and podcasting. The Nova Society is available on all of these and other quality platforms listed in our description. And most importantly, we want to thank you, our listeners. Without your support, the Nova Society could not be possible. If you haven't already, please consider subscribing on the platform of your choice. It's easy, it's free, and helps our channel grow. For questions or comments, you can reach us at nova.society.podcast@gmail.com. So on behalf of Dr. Brooklyn Ann Weldon, Dr. Scott Gershworth, and all of our production partners here at the Nova Society, I'm Dr. Mark Bound. Remember, the true power of society is knowledge. Thank you for listening, and we hope to see you again next time. We'd like to thank our sponsor for this this episode, the Phoenix Research Group, an independent research consortium dedicated to providing solutions to social and political issues for NGOs and international government agencies. Through multidisciplinary, nonpartisan, and unbiased research, the Phoenix Research Group advances understanding and practical strategies for complex challenges. The Phoenix Research Group is a division of the Phoenix Research Institute, the producer of the Nova Society podcast.